because I feel like as undergrads we sort of don't really know how to apply to grad school or what really grad school is all about. So we've invited some grad students along with Sophie from USRE to give a talk about research and to let you know a little bit more during your undergrad. So we are going to first invite Sophie to talk about her undergraduate experience with research and also the application process to grad school. Thank you guys.
Hi, my name is Sophie, and I am in my fifth year of chemical and bioengineering. This year I started a new club known as the Undergraduate Student Research in Engineering, or USRE. So it started in January, pretty much, and our club has two main goals. The first goal is to create a better community amongst undergraduate researchers who might do work here over the summer. So I'm not sure if any of you have had research positions over the summer, but you might have noticed that it's a little bit lonely to be on campus during the summer months. So we try and plan events and kind of social events so that students can get to know one another who are also working as research assistants over the summer. Our second goal is to make research positions more known to those of you who might not be aware of how to get research positions with McMaster University. So one of our biggest events that we actually have coming up in 2 weeks is the Research Opportunities Fair. So this is happening on September 30th, I believe, and it's basically an event where professors from all of the departments in engineering come and they discuss kind of the research that they are doing, and it's an opportunity for students to mingle and get to know them and perhaps start a conversation about getting a research position over the summer. As I said, we also have various student mixers, so these are some photos from a barbecue that we held last summer, and you can see Dean Purry is there with his goofy hat. So this is just a chance for students to kind of get to know one another outside of the lab. That's just a brief introduction about the club, and now I'm going to get more into my path to graduate studies, things that I've done in undergrad that have kind of made it easier for me in my applications for grad school, and how you can go about applying to grad school. So this is me in first year, way back when I was still eager and not burnt out by school. I started in September 2013, and I had my first research position in May of 2015 with Dr. Carlos Felipe. He's the chair of chemical engineering. So we were working on the development of heavy metal detection sensors. So this is basically the system. It was combined of an enzyme substrate system that when they react together in your water, it'll give this characteristic color change from yellow to purple. But when there's heavy metals present in your water, it would deactivate the enzyme, so you wouldn't see any color change. So it's just used as like an indicator of whether or not your water was safe to drink. Fast forward to 2 summers. I spent this summer in Boston doing research with Harvard MIT Division of Health Sciences and Technology. And we were doing research for a minimally invasive skin biopsy. So this image here is essentially these tiny little microneedles that penetrate into the skin, and they don't go deep enough to hit any nerves, so you don't actually feel the penetration. And when they're in the skin, they swell up and take on molecules that can then be analyzed as indicators for tumor markers or various other skin diseases. So, moving forward on how you can apply to graduate schools and how my undergraduate career kind of helped me in my application process. The biggest question at the start when you're thinking about grad school is whether you want to do a Master's of Engineering or a Master's of Applied Science. So these are two very different things, and the short answer kind of depends on what your career goals are. So a Master's of Engineering is typically shorter. It's usually about 12 months, and it's focused on coursework. So usually you'll do like a capstone project, and you'll do a lot of courses, and it's mainly to prepare you to kind of get that leg up when you apply to jobs. So it doesn't really prepare you for further grad studies or a research-based career the same way that a Master's of Applied Science would. A Master's of Applied Science is a little bit longer. It usually takes about 2 years to complete, and this is more thesis-based. So you'll have a research project that you're focusing on with your supervisor, and there's very little coursework involved. And like I said, this is going to better prepare you to pursue a PhD after. Just quickly, PhD, Doctor of Philosophy, this usually takes about 4 years to complete, and it's entirely research-based with a few courses. Usually you need a Master's of Applied Science in order to apply. I'm not going to get too into this because I know that the graduate students who are here are going to give kind of more in-depth presentations on what it's like to be a PhD student. And also briefly, because I know you guys are all in bio, and I'm sure some of you are considering medical school, one kind of interesting thing is the MD PhD program, which is 7 years long. It's very daunting, but you combine your MD and PhD, and so you come out of it with 2 degrees. And it kind of spreads it out a little interestingly. So you do a year of research, and then a few years of studying, and then some more research, and then you do your clerkship. So this is offered at McMaster, Queens. I believe a lot of schools offer it, but it's just something to be aware of if you are interested in pursuing that. However, it's very competitive to get into, so you need to get into medical school first, and then you also need to be accepted to the MD PhD program, and I believe that McMaster, for example, only takes like 3 students a year, so it's very competitive. So these are some of the schools of bioengineering. You can go online and look up the list of what it takes to apply to each school. I'm going to focus on McMaster School of Biomedical Engineering for the purpose of this presentation, but generally speaking, all of the schools have the same kind of requirements and the same application process. So taking a look at McMaster School of Biomedical Engineering, there are different deadlines depending on when you want to start your master's. If you want to start in, say, the May start, then you would need to apply by March. If you don't want to start until September, maybe you want to take a summer off after you finish undergrad, you don't have to worry about applying until, I believe, July. And this is just a picture from the website. I have no idea what they're doing here. So taking a closer look at the application checklist, you need some sort of resume. You also need a certified copy of your transcript, so this has to be something from the registrar's office, not something that you just download on Mosaic. And generally, they look at your final 2 years of study when you're applying to grad school. McMaster takes a B+ average in your final 2 years in order to get in. You also need to prepare a statement of interest. This is usually a 1 to 2 page document just describing why you're interested in going to grad school, what you believe you could benefit from it, or how other people could benefit from it as well. And you need 2 academic letters of recommendation. So this is typically professors who can speak ideally both to your academics as well as your research experience. So just based on this list alone, I want to kind of make it a little bit obvious that getting involved in undergrad, and especially getting involved in research, can give you a huge advantage when you're applying to grad school. If you have research experience over the summer, or if you get to know your professors in that way, then it can make it a lot easier to, say, approach them for letters of recommendation, because they've already worked with you, they already know that you're capable of doing this. As well, when you're writing your statement of interest, you can kind of speak to the research that you've already done, and it might just make it a little bit easier during your grad school application process. Some schools, when you're applying to grad school, they require that you have a supervisor kind of before or during your application process. Other schools, once you've applied and been accepted, they'll match you with a supervisor for your research. But this is just a little list of how to kind of go about finding a supervisor, and this was taken from McGill's website, I believe. And also this can be applied, so if you guys are considering doing research as an undergrad for a summer term, the same set of steps is basically how I went about getting a research position with the Department of Chemical Engineering. So if that's something that you're interested in more like short term, then you should also follow these steps as well. So the first and foremost, you can go online to the department website and read a little bit about what each professor does for research, and get into their publications, read what they're working on, and then set up a meeting or send them an email telling them a bit about why you're interested in their research, how it lines up with your interests, and what you want to do. You want to make sure that you're specific in this email, so actually mention specific things from their publications that shows that you're genuinely interested and that you genuinely looked into it. You don't want to just pretend, act like you looked into it when in reality they'll see right through that. And you also want to be succinct, because professors are really, really busy. They get a ton of emails a day, and if you send them paragraphs, they're not going to read it. So try and keep it to less than 200 words. You can then let them know of your intention to apply to grad school, or if you're looking for an undergrad research position, you can let them know just that you would want to work with them potentially over the summer. And you need to tell them a couple of strong points about yourself, why it would be to their best interest to hire you or to take you on as a graduate student. and ask them, finally, if it's okay to refer to them as a prospective supervisor in your grad school application. For more information on this, there's a link down there. I don't know, are we posting these PowerPoints at all?
Yeah, we should, yeah.
Okay, cool. Another great thing is that you can actually find your own funding before you apply to graduate school, and this can make it a lot easier for you to find supervisors who are willing to take you on as a graduate student. So this was posted on the McMaster School of Graduate Studies website, and it's talking about the CGSM scholarship. So this scholarship is $17,500 for 12 months of your graduate school, and that really covers a big expense so that professors who work with you as a grad student don't have to pay that money for you out of their budget. The application is very similar to the grad school application, and it's due December 1st in the year before you're applying to grad school. And this, for McMaster specifically, it requires an A- average in your final 2 years of study in order to be considered for the scholarship. A few additional considerations that I just want to touch on. I don't know if any of you are in chemical engineering. Yeah? No? Who's in chem eng? Alright, so it's worth talking about. Chemical engineering has an accelerated master's option where you can complete your master's in 16 months after you graduate from undergrad. So it requires that you have a cumulative average of 9.5 and a final sessional average of 10 in your last year. You need to complete 4 months of relevant research experience before you start your final year of study. So for me it was this past summer before I went into 5th year. You also need to complete your senior independent thesis, which is a technical elective that you can take in your final year, and it's entirely research-based. So you actually don't spend any time in the classroom for this course at all. It's literally just like going into the lab about 5-6 hours a week and putting in research that way. You need to complete a 600 level course in your final year, which is kind of interesting because they let you count your 600 level course as both an undergraduate course and a grad school course. So for instance, next semester I'm taking statistics along with all of my friends, and I'm counting it as a requirement for my degree in order to graduate undergrad, and it's also going to count as a 600 level course for when I'm doing my master's. So you kind of knock off 2 courses in one. And then you graduate with a Master's of Applied Science 16 months after you graduate. So it takes from May to the following August. Another thing that might be interesting to you guys, I don't know if any of you are applying to grad school this year, but University of Toronto has this thing called Graduate Research Days, where you apply. I think it's just with your transcript. It's entirely marks-based, and they'll select students to go to U of T for a weekend away, and all of your expenses are paid, so hotel, travel expenses, everything. And it's basically just a chance for you to get tours of the labs and meet with the professors and potential supervisors. The application for this is due on Friday, January 12th, 2018, and you can apply to their IBBME, Integrated Biomedical Engineering School, or you can apply to like chemical engineering or to electrical engineering if you kind of want to focus there. I think that's it for me. I'm going to hang around for the question period at the end of this, so if you guys have any more questions about how to apply to grad school or more questions on how to get involved with research as an undergrad, just let me know. And thank you guys.
PhD student here at McMaster University. I want to thank the teams for inviting me to give you a talk today about my research. But before we get started, I just want to take a quick poll of the room. So raise your hand if you're an engineer. Okay, good. All right, excellent. So when we start making fun of people in, health sciences and all that stuff, they're a small minority. That's fine. All right. How about raise your hand if you're in health sciences? Nothing wrong with that. All right, cool. All right, so you guys understand what I'm talking about. All right. So, as I said before, my name is Omar, and I'm actually a McMaster alumni twice. So I did my bachelor's degree in biomedical engineering, so when you say the old days, I was finishing when you got here, so thanks for making me feel so very, very old. So I got my biomedical undergraduate degree back in 2014. I got my master's degree last year. I'm still very happy about that. And for those of you that are in engineering, I'm also the head TA for 2DI4 and 2DP4 microcontrollers, so I see a lot of familiar faces. And my research, when I don't get to TA you guys, which is a lot of fun, is working specifically with AI and healthcare. So you guys may have heard about machine learning. Raise your hands if you have. It's been in the news a lot. A funny story, I actually learned about machine learning on the very first day of my master's. So I sat down and my supervisor, Dr. Doyle, said to me, "You're going to do machine learning." And this was right before it got cool, so I had no idea what he was talking about. So my knowledge of machine learning has gone at the right time that machine learning became very popular, in the media and research as well, which is great. So specifically, I use machine learning for health risk analysis. So for example, in my master's degree, I built a monitoring device for heart disease. They use machine learning algorithms to see if you are at risk, yes or no, for heart disease. I thought I was going to die of a heart attack during my master's, so it would have been pretty ironic to start beeping like, oh, it works, die. Well, at least it works, right? So what I'm going to be talking to you about today is really 2 projects that I'm working on. And it really can be, if you want to know, Omar, what is your life? It is this diagram right here. So the first thing that I'm doing is I'm developing a new model for predicting cancer risk from medical imaging. And the interesting about that is working on that project kind of led into a whole other problem devised by this nice little blue box here that I'll talk about at the end of the presentation. But let's start first about the medical imaging. So as you guys know, medical imaging is a very powerful diagnostic tool, and it's being used quite a bit. So actually, I'm not sure if you know this, but in 1980, there was about 3 million scans being done in the US. Fast forward to 2013, that number is now up to 76 million. So people are getting scanned, and the same people are getting scanned a lot. And that's actually a little bit of a problem because certain types of imaging, such as CT, nuclear medicine, and fluoroscopy, actually emit low-dose radiation, which we all know that. But what maybe you didn't know is that the potential risks associated with this type of exposure has not really been considered. So if you start to take a look into the dry literature about what's going on, the most popular model is what's referred to as the linear no-threshold model. And basically, we know that a certain radiation, fortunately it came from the Nagasaki bombings, but we know that at certain doses of radiation, there is a higher likelihood of you getting cancer. But at the low range right here, we actually have no idea what's going on. So if I was to describe this model to you, it's kind of like that expression, the straw that broke the camel's back. So if we take a look at the straw that the camel is currently carrying, that's your past exposure. Every new scan you have, based on this model, is like adding one more straw. We don't know when the back is going to break, but the model states that at some point, if you go one scan too many, your chances of getting cancer increases, and you may actually end up developing cancer. Like I said, that's just the model. No, a model is just our way of trying to represent the world. We actually have no idea what's going on down here because we're taking the atomic bomb information and we're just extrapolating it downwards. There is actually no data for medical imaging. No one ever went to a hospital and said, how much have you exposed your people to radiation? I have no bloody clue. So that's really, if we start taking a look into the gaps of the model, are where our 3 main gaps come into play. So all the models, as I mentioned before, extrapolate those risks. So we're just assuming that if high risk is high and at low risk is low. The existing models are based on atomic bomb survivor information, not actually medical imaging. That's like saying it's not an apples and oranges comparison. And finally, the existing models have no mechanism for changing over time. And those 3 things are what I'm going to hopefully try and address over the next, you lied to them. A PhD is not done in 4 years. It's 5, 6, 7, 8. 4 years, no. So don't, you give us all PhD students a heart attack when you say 4 years. Never tell a PhD student it'll be done in 4 years. So what's my plan for trying to address this? So it's a 3-step process that, again, I'm going to assume no knowledge of machine learning. But the 3 main steps to creating a model is first to extract new information. So we're working with Hamilton Health Sciences, which is the hospital right here. Interestingly enough, that's the hospital I was born at. I've been here a long time. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be getting information on patients' past exposure from medical and imaging records. From then using machine learning, we want to construct a model for risk analysis. When is a patient at risk for a scan versus when they're not at risk for a scan? So when they come in, they say, we think you need a medical scan. This AI system can say, yes, you should have that scan, it's safe. No, we think maybe there might be an increased risk. And next what we're going to do is deploy the model as part of a real-time medical decision support system. So I'm pretty lucky. I get to work with a supercomputer. Actually, I get to work with two supercomputers. It's a lot of fun. And I'm also working with IBM as part of my research. So one of the things that's important in research, as was mentioned, is having a faculty advisor. There's a lot of industry collaboration as well as you can do. So I'm doing mine with IBM. How am I doing on time?
You got 4 minutes.
4 minutes, perfect. Just what I need then. All right. So the one thing I haven't alluded to is the ability for my model to change over time. So everyone keeps, so a funny story, a couple of years ago I was giving a talk to a class of people in 10th grade. And they wanted to know my opinion, did you think machine learning was going to take over the world? Machine learning is really cool while it's learning. But after you deploy the system, that's it. This line right here is the accuracy you're going to receive. Your machine learning algorithms cannot evolve after they've already been deployed. If we wanted to improve our system, we would have to go back to, remember that process I talked about. Extract data, build your model, deploy your model. And while the machine learning itself is relatively cheap to do, doing all of this is horrendously expensive. It needs a human expert like me to come in and actually guide the model throughout the process. So what the second part of my research is to try and automate that process. Can we make a machine learning algorithm, once we've deployed, capable of learning new data on its own with minimal interaction? Maybe at that point I could answer the question that yes, a machine learning algorithm is going to take over the world. If I succeed and get my PhD, maybe we're one step closer to Elon Musk's apocalypse. I apologize, I need to agree. So I think just one of the ways we can go about doing that is by trying to involve an expert in the loop. So we can say we take in new data, I think the algorithm identifies some new data that we think is promising, and then present it to a human expert. Again, those types of systems have some problems. So again, we can see now we've gone from the blue line to the red line right up here. But there's still time here where my model could do better. And I'm trying to improve the model's accuracy in between those times. Please don't ask me how I plan to do it. That's what the PhD is for. My current thinking is to have this guy right here. So some type of watchdog or oversighter that will basically say, okay, we have a deployed model. We have some new data coming in. Now I think is the time to bring in a human expert dynamically to go ahead and update the system. Will it work? One of the most reassuring things my supervisor ever told me was, I asked him, will any of this work? And he answered, I don't know, we'll find out. That's the whole point of research. So in terms of the future work, so I'm currently working on collecting the data to create that low-dose model. We're going to be using supercomputers to try and implement a proof of concept of that watchdog algorithm I was talking about. And then we're going to test it and see, can it actually do better than current machine learning algorithms? So that's just my conclusion slide right there. So just the 2 points to take away is that there's currently no system for benefit risk analysis for medical imaging. And existing machine learning algorithms can't incorporate new data once you go ahead and deploy them. So we're hoping that with our research to create a new model and create a framework that other researchers can use. So again, my name is Omar Boursalie. I want to thank you very much for taking a moment to listen to me about my research, and yeah, I'd be happy to answer any questions either now or during the Q&A or afterwards. Thank you.
Omar was right. Your PhD has never done in 4 years. So I'm a live example actually. I'm in my 5th year PhD. And I'm not done yet. I'm not going to be done anytime soon. Okay. So, well, I do have a story behind it, but we'll leave that for after. So today, I literally put this presentation together like an hour and a half ago. I had some cool drawings of what I do in my research, so I just thought I'll share those with you. So I did my undergrad, a little background about me, since Omar talks a lot about himself. I'll just give you a little bit of background about myself. I did my undergrad in chemical engineering. I was really interested in bio. I was not interested in what we were studying as chemical engineers at all. Like process engineering, like heat transfer, I hated that. So I kind of shifted towards the bio side of things. in my undergrad, and then I applied for grad school for biomedical engineering. And then at the moment I didn't really know what I wanted out of biomedical engineering, but I knew that I loved to work with animals. And I also liked to work on projects that were really practical. So the result that you would get out of the project at the end, you could kind of implement it or like transfer it to, okay, I use this drug on something, and then it has these side effects on that something, so now I can transfer it to humans and say, okay, this is what's going to happen if the human takes that drug or whatever. Okay, so that was my undergrad. I was working with Dr. Greg Wool. I don't know if you guys know him. He's a mechanical engineer. He's a great guy. So my master's was mostly focused on seeing what the effects of the antidepressant drugs are on the bone. That sounds really cool. It was really good. I actually really enjoyed my master's project. And then I kind of shifted gears a little bit. I went back to biomaterials, which was mostly really related to chemical engineering more than biomechanics. So I started working in the lab in Dr. Todd Hoare's lab. You guys, I'm pretty sure if you're a chemical engineer, you should know his name. The name stands out, guys. Okay? So I was actually a PhD student here. Michael, he was my lab mate since last year. So I was in his lab for 3 years. I worked on nanoparticles with polymers and stuff to actually make them as a drug delivery system to cure cancer. Guess what? I did cure cancer. No, I wasn't even close. But I actually learned a lot from that lab, and then I kind of decided to have a change, so I transferred to another lab in my third year PhD. Don't do that unless you have no other choice, which was my case, so I had to kind of make that choice. So that's why I'm still a PhD student in my 5th year, because I actually started a new project in my 4th year PhD. But surprisingly, it's actually moving way better, Michael, than what I was doing before. Okay, so what I do in my PhD is that I work with actual medical devices that you guys see, I don't know, you might not see. If you're in a hospital or if you have a friend, family member that has, for example, got a medical implant, like a mechanical heart valve, or if you're in a hospital, I'm pretty sure you all have seen catheters before, right? So what I do is that I work with actual medical devices like catheters, mechanical heart valves, vascular grafts. I try to make them work better. So the main problem that you might see, or if you're interested in reading about it, is that once these medical devices are in touch with blood, or they're in contact with blood, clotting starts happening on their surface, okay? So and when that happens, the medical device gets rejected from the body. This is really a really important issue when you're talking about like long-term implants like mechanical valves or vascular grafts and those kind of stuff, because you don't want that happening. You want to implant something in a patient and you want to leave it there for the entire life of that patient, okay? So that's what I do. So what does that mean? It means this graph over here. We're going to memorize each and every step today together. How does that sound? No, I don't even know what is going on in this graph. So the only thing that you guys have to take away with this is that this is the clotting cascade. So this is actually what happens when you cut yourself or blood clots form in your body or outside your body. So basically what happens is that proteins attach to the surface and then the cascade starts getting activated and you get clot formation. So what I'm trying to do is that I'm trying to prevent this from happening on my medical device, okay? So this was the first project that I did, and we actually got a recent publication in Nature Scientific Reports. That's a link to it if you guys want to look at it. So what I basically did is that we had the medical catheters, so we work with actual devices, as I said. We could have purchased what the polymer that's used in the catheter and work with that, but we prefer to work with something that's actually being used and try to modify the surface of the medical implant itself and make it better. So what we did was that we had the medical device, and then we did some magic to it with the chemical modification that we were having. And then we also compared it to like a conventional technique that's being used to make this modification. And at the end, what we found was that I forgot to put the cool images of the clot formation itself. I'm so stupid. But if you guys go look at the link, you could actually see the SEM images of the clot that was formed on these devices. So basically what I did in this project was that I improved the biocompatibility of the catheter and I made it more blood friendly. Okay? So this is the project that I'm working on right now. Is that so during your like the projects that you do, you learn a lot. So for example, from the first project, I learned a lot about surface modification, how to chemically modify like a surface of a device or whatever. And then you kind of add things to it and try to apply that to another device that needs something in addition to what you did previously. So in our current project right now, what we're trying to do is that we're trying to modify the ring. So what is this? Do you guys know? What does it look like? A wheel?
Organical hardball?
Yeah. My drawing's really good, eh? So this is actually a mechanical heart valve, and what we're trying to do is that we're trying to modify the ring of the mechanical heart valve to, again, make it biocompatible. But in this project, what we're trying to add is that we're trying to add some biofunctionality to the surface too. Not only we want to prevent proteins or like clot formation from happening on the device, we also want the cells and the proteins that we like to attach to the surface. Okay? So it's a really complicated system that we have there. So this is in progress. We actually have a lot of cool results that we're going to wrap up soon and hopefully get a publication. And now, what is this? This is me using my imagination. So this is the third project that I'm currently working on with master students in our lab. And the good thing about grad school is that, it depends on your supervisor, so don't get me wrong. If you have a supervisor that gives you the freedom, you could actually think and design your own project, troubleshoot your own project, add like wings to it, and try to make it better. So this is basically what I tried to do here. So I tried to start from one surface, which is a simple glass slide, and I tried to apply different modification steps to the glass slide and see what I could get out of it. Okay? So what we were trying to design here was that we were trying to design a surface that we could ultimately use for diagnostic devices or biosensors. And in this diagram here, I actually tried to apply whatever I use on my catheters or, for example, the mechanical heart valve, and apply it to a glass slide and see what I could get out of it. So currently, these two projects are done. They're being wrapped up. So we were able to actually make a biofunctional omniphobic slippery surface that would both prevent blood coagulation and also have the biofunctionality properties that we wanted them to. That's about it. So, yeah, that's a question that you guys have to ask yourselves. Does grad school actually sound like fun? Yeah, thank you.
But I can talk a little bit about it too. So, my name is Alejandro. I am a PhD student in the School of Biomedical Engineering here at McMaster. And how did I got here? I am from Mexico. I am right now in my third year, but before coming here, I did my undergrad in electrical engineering. After that, I did a master's degree in biomedical engineering. And from that time, I started working with medical imaging. I like pictures. Back then, I worked with nuclear medicine, radiation, and that kind of stuff. It's quite fun. But after that, I started working for a university back in Mexico. I decided that, okay, if I want to keep working in the university, I need to get a PhD, because otherwise, there's going to come a guy with a PhD and they're going to kick me out. So that wasn't really a good deal. And I decided that I didn't want to do I didn't want to do my PhD in Mexico. It's been like so long there. There was only really one option for me to do it back home, and that's where I did my master's. So I started looking for a different place to do it. And for whatever reason, the planets aligned, or whatever you want to call it, I got here to McMaster, which I'm really thankful, and it's been really nice. And now, yes, I can start talking a little bit about what am I doing here. Okay, I am working with Dr. Michael Noteworthy. He is the director of the School of Biomedical Engineering. I am working in St. Joseph's Healthcare. Pardon me? Co-director, sorry, yes. Co-director, my bad. I work in the Imaging Research Center. This is located in St. Joseph's Healthcare. I guess everybody knows where that is in downtown. And as I said, I work with medical imaging, but this time I decided to work with MRI. Turns out that I figured that MRI is way cooler than X-ray and that kind of stuff. Why? Because we don't actually harm the patient at all. We don't give any doses, any radiation, so you can have as many MRIs as you want. Actually, myself, I've had probably over 100 right now in the past 3 years. And I am collecting my body parts. I have my brain, my chest, I have my knee, I have my leg. So I'm still like working on, hopefully soon I'll get my lungs. But that's another story. Well, and what do? I work in the development of software and hardware for MRI. And the aim of this is to apply techniques in the evaluation of mild traumatic brain injury. I guess a lot of you guys play sports, hockey. We're in Canada, duh. How many of you guys play hockey? Yeah, yes, I saw it. Football. Soccer, yes, soccer. For me, football is soccer. Oh, yeah, so, but football, American football, that's also good. So there are plenty of sports or plenty of situations that can get us a traumatic brain injury, a mild traumatic brain injury or concussion. But what is this? What happens with the brain? Turns out that there is a whole metabolic cascade that turns into axonal injury, mainly axons. Do you guys know what axons are? Do you guys know what axons are? Yes. Can somebody say yes? Yes. Thank you. Okay, so we have diffuse cerebral swelling. This means the brain swells, and we don't know exactly where. And diffuse axonal injury. We have injuries, but everywhere. Why is it everywhere? Because every single concussion is different. Every single case is specific, and we cannot actually see what exactly happens. So how do we diagnose this? Well, people use different psychological tests, Glasgow Coma Scale, Kinetic. There is a bunch of tests that people do, and they even run it on the sidelines of whatever game is happening. But these kind of tests are not that specific. They run a couple of questions, pretty much like, hey, how many fingers do you see? Are you feeling dizzy, etc., etc., etc. So then, having an accurate diagnosis becomes really hard. That's why we start imaging the brains to see what's going on. What can we do? We can do CT, we can do MRI, we can do SPECT, PET, many different imaging modalities. And what do we know about each of those? Or what we want is to get the most information possible from those. Problem, though, is for most of these scans, which are the clinical scans, the regular scans that you would run into in a diagnostic imaging department at a hospital, when you have a concussion, those scans will show a normal brain. You wouldn't see anything at all. So what we want to do is we want to go a little bit further. Can we explore more than just the structure, than only the way the brain looks in those images? Well, MRI allows us to do that. one of the things that makes MRI very fun and very interesting is that you can run different exams in the same session, in the same machine. These different exams are called different sequences that you run with this machine. Who has had an MRI here ever?
I actually had an MRI of that.
Yes, you did. I was there. Turns out that, do you remember when you were having that MRI, how it was really loud in there, that they even give you earplugs? Because you start like hearing a lot of noises, like clicking and stuff. Well, it turns out that those noises are the actual sequences that are being played with the scanner in order to detect the information. So we can have all types of information. We can have the structural information. We can have functional information. Have you heard about functional MRI? We can have even metabolic information about different compounds that we find in the brain. And the idea is to combine all these different modalities, all these different information sources to produce a more accurate diagnosis. So far, all these studies can be done or performed now, but even that is not enough. Even that is hard, even with all this, it's hard to tell what's exactly going on or where is exactly the damage or what's exactly happening. So, we also have, with MRI, the capabilities of looking at not only water, but other things in the brain, such as ATP. Do you guys know what ATP is?
Yeah.
All the energy production that happens in the cells. Well, we can look at it using MRI as well. My specific work is in the development of techniques of sequences of hardware and software to actually acquire that information from the brain. And what does that involve? Well, that involves lots of hardware building, coil building, hours and hours of scanning, testing all this hardware in the lab, building the lab. Of course, there's a lot of theory and a lot of things behind it, but it's quite fun, right? This one, we were building this lab in my supervisor's garage. Because when I told him, Mike, can we get a coil for these studies? It's going to cost us $90,000. He said, no, it's going to be a little bit hard, but let's build one. So what we did is we bought a bunch of wood, copper pipes, a case of beer, and we just went there for the weekend and we built the core. Now, this is a hard process. It takes time. It's complicated, but it's a lot of fun. And additionally to that, we also have to work in the software. How do we program the sequences? How do we program the MRI to actually get the information that we want? These are just a couple of pictures of the data that I collect, and all that is basically like looking at what's done on this field right now and how you can improve, how you can make it work a little bit better. And one of the other advantages of being in grad school on doing all this kind of stuff is that if you have a cool supervisor, and I want to be very clear on this, just like Maryam said, choosing a good supervisor for your grad studies is a key thing. Your graduation probably will depend on it, and how long you're going to spend doing your grad studies too, right? Why am I saying this? Because previous speakers, both of them said that there is no way that you can finish your PhD in 4 years. I'm going to give it a shot. But we'll see. Hopefully I will, and if not in the 4th, probably 4.5 tops, right? We'll see how that goes. And finally, if you have have a good supervisor, you get to go to conferences, you get to travel, you get to present your work, you get to put your work out there and present it at different places, and also having some fun. This is my supervisor. He plays in a band that presents every year at a conference. So let's say that they are in the world tour. And from now on, well, a couple of pictures of the work that I presented. I think we are good. And well, I'll be happy to answer any questions you guys have.
So, like Kaylee said, I'm going to be talking about some of the work that I do here at McMaster. So, I am in the Department of Chemical Engineering, so not biomedical engineering, but a lot of the stuff that I do is very similar to what you'd be studying in a biomedical engineering lab. So, the title of my thesis is the design and fabrication of nanostructured smart hydrogels from biopolymer nanoparticle building blocks. And that's a huge mouthful, which I totally understand, but I will hopefully tell you guys a little bit more about that. So, like I said, I am a member of the HOR Lab, so if you do want to visit our website and you're interested in kind of some of the things that we are studying, feel free to do that with the web link outlined in red. We are always looking for summer students. I know last summer I had actually Kaylee as one of my students, as well as another student too, so we're always looking for people eager to do research. So kind of what I do, like Omar said, so the potential to work with an industrial supervisor is possible in your grad studies, and that's exactly what I do. So I work with a company called Ecosynthetics, which is in Burlington, Ontario. And they're one of 3 companies in the world that makes starch nanoparticles on an industrial scale. So they mainly use these particles for paper and pulp processing, but what we're trying to do with this strategic grant that we got granted through NSERC is to see what other things can we do. Can we extrapolate this technology to biomedical domains, for instance? So kind of what I'm doing is basically chemically modifying these starch nanoparticles to then give me hydrogels, which I will talk about in a bit, for whatever application I'm basically trying to exploit. So I wanted to just go over one of the projects that I'm working on. So I actually have like a list of like 10 projects that I'm working on right now, but I felt as if this one was the most applicable to the audience, being biomedically related. So with that being said, what I mainly do is I make hydrogels. So a lot of people in the room are probably familiar with what these are, but if you're not, a hydrogel is basically a polymer network. So basically you take monomers, cross-link them in some way, shape, or form, and you're basically left with a porous structure as shown over there. And why this is so important is we can basically absorb water, and that basically gives us a material that's similar to tissues in the body. And with that being said, we can actually tune the amount of cross-linking that we have for whatever application we're looking for. So with that being said, we can make a lot of different hydrogels based off the source, so if it's synthetic or natural, the composition of the polymers you're using to make those hydrogels and their configuration, as well as their cross-linking type and composition. So specifically what I do, so I actually am showing kind of like a little bit more data in my presentation, so take that as you will, but basically for my first project what I mainly wanted to do was investigate what are the properties of a hydrogel made with just starch nanoparticles in comparison to other starch hydrogels. So people have been making starch hydrogels for many, many years, but no one has really described the use of a nanoparticle system for this development. So one project that I started working on was basically functionalizing the surface of the starch nanoparticle, which is rich in hydroxyl groups, to basically have a methacrylate group. So methacrylate groups, as shown here, can basically polymerize on themselves and give you a hydrogel, and that's essentially what I did. So had these methacrylated particles in solution, add an initiator, and then I get a hydrogel. So why that is interesting for us, so if you guys are studying the literature at all in terms of biomaterial development, you'll know that the first thing that happens when a material gets put in your body is basically it gets surrounded by a lot of proteins. And that can come with some caveats. So basically the amount of protein that you have and their configuration will determine if the biomaterial is going to induce some toxicity to the body. So basically what we wanted to test was if I wanted to put these starch particles in a body, how much protein am I getting on the surface? So that's what I assessed here. So as you'll see on the y-axis, I basically have nanograms of protein per centimeter squared, or surface area of my hydrogel, and the protein concentrations. What you'll basically notice is that for all of these concentrations, we have really, really low protein absorption. And that's actually very good for us. So if we want to make a surface or a biomaterial with these starch particles, we know we're absorbing a minimal amount of protein, so we should have a lower risk of an immunogenic effect, essentially. So with that being said, we wanted to test that. So when you have proteins on your surface, proteins will interact with cells through their integrin binding system. And basically, if you have a protein on your surface, that's what a cell needs to see in order to sit on your material. So basically, if you have a material in the body and it's clouded with cells, its functionality isn't going to be what it is without cells on it. So that's a really big issue in terms of biomaterial development. So for the sake of this presentation, don't worry about these headers up here. But basically, what I did was a live dead analysis here. So basically, up here is all my live cells, down here is my dead. And basically, these three are my experimental hydrogels. And then my control is basically just a plate where I put cells on it. Basically what we see is that we have hardly any cells on the surface of my hydrogel, which basically makes sense because if we don't have a lot of protein on the surface, we wouldn't expect a lot of cells. Furthermore, we wanted to compare those starch nanoparticles to just regular starch gels. And what we basically see, you'll notice with these normal starch gels, they have more cells adhering, which basically means our particles offer some inherent benefits to linear starch. Furthermore, if you're ever developing a biomaterial, kind of one of the most important things to test is how toxic is this material to cells. So we always talk about doing in vitro and in vivo measurements. So an in vitro measurement, basically you're taking cells in a lab environment and testing them. In vivo, you're basically injecting your system into a live animal. But before you can get results in a live animal, it's good to do your in vitro test first. So that's exactly what we did. Basically, what these graphs convey, I know there's kind of a lot of data here, but kind of going over all of it is unnecessary. But basically what we see is that we have really high viability for all these starch hydrogels. So basically we feel confident that we can put these in the body, we cannot elicit a toxic response, and we can have the same functionality that we intended when we put it in. So with that being said, I do want to just talk a little bit, since I didn't do it at the start, just about my involvement with summer research. So highlighted here are actually 3 undergrad students that I've directly supervised. So Carter McGinnis was in biochemistry, and he graduated last year. So he did a lot of this work for the UV photopolymerizable gels. And he's actually getting 2 papers out of the work that he did for the whole year. Kaylee, who's in the room, I actually did another project with her where we made starch hydrogels and put them in plants. So completely different than what I showed you here. And I didn't really show it just because it's not biomedical, technically. And then Ashlyn, who's shown in the image all the way over, she worked on a different project where we're basically trying to functionalize these starch particles to have a mucoadhesive layer around them and then inject them in the noses of rats that basically have Parkinson's and try to eliminate their symptomology. So that work's still being done right now, so stay tuned if you want to hear more results. But basically, if you are interested in any of the work we're doing in the HOR lab or that I'm doing specifically, I have my contact information listed here, and I urge you guys to feel free to ask questions about any of this work.
You actually have to know what you want to do. Like, I mean, a lot of us are first year, second year, third years, so we don't exactly have something in mind that we want to research in graduate school. And like, can you maybe speak to that like transition of knowledge?
I can talk to that. So one thing to keep in mind with grad school is what you actually study in your PhD is rarely what you're going to do for the rest of your life. So it really doesn't necessarily matter what you specifically study. It matters what tangible skills you get out of it. So if you are in, if you know that you want to do something related to chemistry, doing a chemistry heavy type lab, even if you're studying, like for instance, I don't want to study starch the rest of my life, but I really like my project because I've learned a whole slew of kind of techniques and learned how to use a lot of machines that I wouldn't normally be able to use. So it's kind of looking at what tangible skills do I need to get the job that I want, and that's kind of the best way to go about it.
Just jumping off what Michael was saying, so like for example, I'm doing a lot of data analysis. No wet lab is going to hire me, obviously. So that's one of the things that, even though we didn't know what we wanted to do, I knew I was interested in doing that type of research. So it's more about finding a lab that's somewhat aligned in the field that you're interested in. Yeah, it doesn't have to be exactly correct.
And well, following to that, I gotta say it's kind of the same pathway that you have followed so far in terms of you study high school, and then you had to choose what do I want to do for my undergrad. And for some reason you decided to go to engineering and not health sciences or business, right? It's kind of something similar with a little bit narrower bandwidth, but just getting into the same thing. If you like, for example, in my case, I knew that I like medical imaging, so I knew I liked that, so I jumped into nuclear medicine, and I knew after that well, I still like medical imaging, and I knew MRI was like a big thing happening, a big thing going on, and I decided to go into it, even though I didn't know what exactly I was going to do, right? But at the end, you learn about the field, you learn a lot of skills, like Michael was saying, and that's what matters the most, even though you don't know specifics on it, but you have an idea of where you are aiming, right?
Something that I would like to add is that, so most of you are aware of volunteering in labs and doing like summer jobs and etc. That is actually a great way of learning about the research that's being done in that lab and the lab environment and the supervisor itself. So if you do want to join a lab or want to go to grad studies, I actually highly recommend you be volunteering in that lab first, just to learn about, it looks cool from the outside sometimes, especially if you look at the websites and the papers that they're doing and the projects that they're doing. It's really interesting because that's the business, right? You have to present yourself in a way that people are interested in what you're doing. So if you go inside the lab and actually do the research and join a couple of projects that they're doing in the lab, you get a really better feeling about that lab and whether you like doing research in that specific area or no. You have to change your interests, and what you thought you would like is not really what you actually like.
Great answer, guys.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Does reading other people's research papers get less painful?
Absolutely.
You learn how to, in my opinion, you learn how to read the paper properly down the road. So in the beginning, I thought that, okay, if I find a paper that's relevant to what I'm doing, I have to read it from abstract to discussion. But that's not the way that you should actually read a paper. You kind of, and to be honest, if you're really interested in the project that you're doing and you're actually really interested to finding answers to the problems that you're having, reading papers is not that painful, because once you find a paper that has done work on that specific problem that you're having and you find the answer, you're actually really motivated to look into that paper more and dig into it and see what's going on. But my short answer is that I hate reading papers still. I'm in my 5th year PhD, but I've learned how to kind of read them properly and not spend so much time and digging into information that is not really useful for me.
And it becomes painful again when you find a paper that did what you want to do.
That is the greatest fear of every
But you hide that paper. You bury it.
Yes.
Awesome. Great answers. Any other questions? Yeah, sure.
What was your motivation for getting a PhD? I know Alejandro already mentioned working at the university and stuff, but the rest of it.
My motivation was that when I finished my master's, the field that I did my master's, I wasn't really sure if I wanted to actually find a job specifically in that biomechanics field that I did, and it was a really niche field. So I heard from people saying that there's not that many jobs out there. My second most important reason was because I wasn't ready to dedicate my life to a 9-to-5 job, and I wasn't really ready to look for jobs too. And I liked research that I did in my master's, so I did like research in general, although that was a bad decision to make. But yeah.
You're supposed to be motivating them.
I'm here to tell you guys the truth. If you can get away with a master's, don't do a PhD. That's what I'm telling you. If you're really interested in research, if you're really interested in, you know, finding solutions and finding answers to problems, and most importantly, if you're interested in becoming a prof and staying in academics, yes, you have to do a PhD. Just like how Alejandro said, if he goes back to Mexico right now, he has a secure job, and he's going to be a professor, hopefully, yeah, if no one has stolen that position from him. So yeah, but you could gain a lot of experience in the 2 years of master's that you're doing, so that's my advice. Don't do it.
So I have way different advice. So I actually did my undergrad in the States, so I'm from Ohio. So I did my undergrad in 5 years with co-op, and then I started doing research my first year of undergrad. Did research all 5 years, knew I wanted to be a prof, like that's my #1 passion in life, so I knew I wanted to get a PhD, so I got direct admit to PhD, so I skipped my master's and instantly just went to PhD. And I did that. I was able to do that because I had high enough marks, high enough research papers and stuff from undergrad. So for me, like I think it's really important when you are going to grad school to really assess why are you doing it. Because kind of what everyone's shown is it's a lot of work. It's not easy. It does take a lot of time out of your day. So I think it's really important to kind of like sit down and say, what is my dream job? Where do I want to be in the next 5, 10, 15 years? And if a PhD is required for you to get that in 5, 10, 15 years, then go do it. If it's not, maybe reconsider.
So you want to become prof?
Absolutely.
Don't be his student, guys. I've worked with him. He's a pain. No, I'm kidding.
Raise your hand if I was your TA. That's why. That's why I'm doing this. I suffer every day because of you guys. I love teaching these guys. It's so much fun. I can't imagine doing anything else, and I'll do absolutely anything that's required to keep that going.
I think the take-home message from this question would be, #1, learn from your mistakes. That's a very important one. #2, really spend some time thinking of what you want to do next. You might have a couple of years to go in your undergrad, and that's plenty of time to think of, okay, do I see myself involved in research, in academia? Do I see myself teaching? Do I see myself involved in a lab doing this research? If you say no, well, do I see myself doing research in industry? And do I like, or would I be happy doing that? Yes, and take into account that the further you go in your education, the less the job opportunities that you will find out there that suit your skills. Okay, that's, yeah, because there are not many people with that level or with that degree of education. You can find a job, yes, with less required skills, yes, but whether that's going to fulfill your desires, your dreams, and your needs, we'll see. And yes, I would agree as well in terms of don't go to grad school just because I don't know what else to do. That's the worst reason. That's the worst reason why you would go to grad school. Same thing as don't go to med school if you think your life is going to be like Grey's Anatomy, please.
You watch that?
No, I don't. I never wanted to go to med school. Actually, funny story, at some point when I was a kid, I wanted to go to med school, I wanted to become a doctor. My grandpa, he's a doctor, and I went with him and I asked him, Grandpa, what do I have to do to become a doctor? And he said, never in your life think about becoming a doctor. Fair enough, he said, I just listened, but I kind of went into, yeah, exactly, go for a PhD, but I kind of stayed in the field. So,
my grandpa's also a doctor, but I still want to go to med school.
And finally, take care of your marks. I know that people say all the time that marks don't count, and at the end, it doesn't define you as a person. Yes, that's very true. However, for getting scholarships, funding, and some opportunities, they do matter. Okay, so yeah, it's a bit of a pain, yeah, but you may regret not taking the time to get the marks that you might need in the future.
I did not get the marks that I need, and I regret now. I have fun in my career. Pay the price now, yes.
Oh, any other questions? Yes? What did you say?
So one of you mentioned like research in an industrial setting versus research in like a more academic setting. Could you maybe like, I guess each of you answer which would be like your preferred choice and like maybe a few reasons why?
Yeah, so like for me, my project's kind of a weird one in the sense that it's industrial but not really. So like I don't have a person at that industrial supervisor who's like on my back all the time with like deadlines and stuff like that. Since I'm on a strategic grant, like so if you look at NSERT's website for instance, if you are applying to grad school, there's a lot of different grants you can get hired on. And one is a strategic grant, which is the one that I'm on. And basically that's, hey, this company does A, but we want to see if we can possibly do B. So instead of putting our money into doing that, let's just see if a PhD student can do it, basically. So that's kind of the project that I'm on. And I actually really like it because I'm doing completely new stuff that no one's ever done before. So, and when I go to present the company, they're kind of like, oh, I never really thought of that. I never thought our materials could be used like that. But there are more industrial projects where you're kind of, I don't know, working with them, so to speak, so you can't really publish papers, you can't really present at conferences, stuff like that. Those ones I don't really know as much about, because with mine, I'm allowed to publish papers and stuff like that, so hopefully that.
Just to jump off on that, again, it depends, what would you like to do once you have your degree? So if you're not, so there are people that, like, there's only X number of professors at every university. Vast majority of PhDs do go into industry. So it's a great way to get your hooks into a company. You know, if you work with a company through an industrial collaboration, when you finish, they're going to hire you because they've already trained you, they know you. So that's a very useful thing to have for people that are, again, who want to go into industry afterwards. Again, if you're interested in going into academics, of course you have to publish, so then you don't want to go into an industry setting. That's primarily the main differentiation between the two. Is where do you want to go afterwards?
And for the academic side, remember guys, you gotta ask yourself if you like to teach or not the things you're learning, which involves a whole other set of skills, because that's one of the problems that you face when you go into academia, because you learn about something, whatever, you learn about how to make hydrogels, you learn about machine learning, you learn about surface, non-sticky surface, or MRI.
That's how you define my project. Thank you.
Your supervisor just gave a lecture at the course on TA, so
that's how you defined it?
beautiful biocompatible devices.
That's better.
Okay. Or medical imaging, you learn about that, but then you don't know how to teach. You probably have faced this with many of your teachers, that they just come to the front of the classroom and they just start like throwing at you a bunch of information and you have no idea what the hell is going on. It's really boring. So you don't want to be a pro like that. So you also gotta learn a whole bunch of other skills. But well, that's another thing. The thing is, think if you like or not to teach.
So something that I could add to that is that I don't know if you guys know, but McMaster has this new co-op program right now for their masters and PhDs. So they actually came to this conclusion that if they kind of, if you get an experience during your PhD, other than the lab experience, so if you actually go do like a 6-month to 8-month co-op in a company or whatever, that's actually really beneficial for you during doing your degree. So that's actually available right now. If you find a professor here at Mac that's willing to hire you as a co-op student, you could actually be a co-op / grad student while you're doing your master's or PhD. So it's only Mac and UBC right now in Canada that actually have this program. I'm not sure how many students they hire, but it just started. But I think it's a really great idea that you do gain some experience in the industry while you're doing your PhD, because life out there is way different than what you're doing on the lab bench. The thing that I like about industrial research is that it's really, uniform and laid out for you. So if you're doing a research in your lab, you might want to kill yourself. Like there are days that you can't really find the answer, and you're like, I'm gonna quit. I can't do this anymore. But if you're working in industry, it's kind of, I don't think you reach to that point because you collaborate with a lot of people there. So it's like a defined project. They give you the tasks that you have to do, and you're responsible. You get trained before, like performing that task, and then you know what your responsibility is, and then you just move towards that. And the other thing is that once you leave the company, you leave the company, okay? But in your grad school, if you leave the lab, you still constantly have this thought in your mind, okay, why didn't that experiment work? So what can I do tomorrow to make it better? You might stay in the lab, till 12, 1 a.m. to kind of figure out what your experience, your problems are. But I feel like in research that you do in industry, you kind of, cut yourself off once your day in the company or in the whatever you're working is done. You leave it there, which they both have their pros and cons. And another thing about doing this co-op program is that, as Omar said, you're going to get hooked up with like a company that already has trained you. So you get a higher chance of actually getting hired in that company after you're done your degree. Definitely consider this co-op program if you're interested in doing your grad school here at Mac.
Cool, thank you. And we'll be taking the last question now before we break off into the informal networking session. Do we have any more questions?
The cameraman.
The cameraman, yeah.
Yeah, the camera died. So I loved your guys' presentations. So you guys talked a lot about the research and the results of the research, and you were just talking about how you'd be at the lab till 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. So in doing this sort of research, is there any sort of why are you guys driven to produce results go into super early in the morning? Is there some sort of pressure to produce these results, or is it out of your own volition that you really want to get these things done?
In my case, to be honest, as I said, I'm in my 5th year and I want to get out of here as soon as possible. So you need to have results to graduate. Let me put it like that, okay? You need to publish papers to graduate. If you're a PhD, you need a minimum of 3 papers. It's not like a university requirement, but it's something that most supervisors want from you to graduate. And the other thing is that your project and you've had intellectual contribution to, getting the whole layout set up. It kind of is your personal responsibility to prove to others. Right now, I am in that state that I'm constantly fighting with my supervisor that I'm trying to prove him something that he doesn't really think that it's going to work. So that's something that's really motivating me. If someone tells me that the thought or the way that you're thinking is stupid, I get motivated more to actually prove them wrong. So the reason why I stay in the lab till 1 or 2 maybe is because I actually care that much to have a result in the morning to show to my supervisor and say, no, you were wrong.
You can have that passion, of course, which is most desirable thing we have. But sometimes it is also some pressure. Deadline-driven research, the way I like to describe it. So sometimes you have deadlines until this day, at this time, to submit your abstract, your work for a conference. And of course, it always happens. You end up staying, working 24 hours for the very last week to make things work in order to achieve that deadline. Last one that I had was last week on Wednesday. Deadline was 11:59, and I submitted 11:58. Something like that.
Was it already extended a week at that point?
No.
For the extension?
No, this one never extends the deadline. Yes. That's the thing. When you know that they're going to extend the deadline, then it's, they will extend it. And then there comes the deadline, right? That's the way it works. That's the way it happens. And that's just the thing. It may be because of pressure, and it may be because of passion. And at the end, yes, Maryam is completely right in terms of your project becomes your baby, or pretty much your life while you are in your grad studies.
I'm all over it.
And anyways, it's a thing to really put a thought in, right? Whether you want to go or not to grad school.
So just to add to that, also, if you are in a position where you're thinking about going into academia, like I was when I was in undergrad and like I am now, whatever the bar is set to be a good PhD student, so 3 or 4 or 5 papers, you need to be above that. So you need to have 7, 8, 9, 10. So for me, that's why I've taken on as many projects as I have, and Kaylee can kind of attest to that. I can just constantly work 7 days a week. That's just because I'm really trying to fulfill that goal for me. So it's kind of self-driven, but also externally. And yeah, so that's
My supervisors like to say both work. It's a mixture. You have to have passion, and then you inject a little bit of panic every now and again to get to great place.
And just remember that the nightmares never go away. You just gotta learn how to deal with them.
So before we break off into the one-on-one questions that you guys might have, I just wanted to highlight USRE, the Undergraduate Research Institute. So everyone that's in red with the big USRE logo, they'll be here to answer any questions if you're passionate about graduate school, about doing research. They're holding wonderful events throughout the year. These will be holding hopefully their social before the year's out, and next semester we're looking at a medical talk from a doctor who was an engineer to come in to talk. Another lecture series, and any other ideas you guys might have. We have a Facebook page. Both of these have too. So if you guys any ideas for like events we should run, just DM us, like slide into the DMs.
Doctors that became an engineer or an engineer?
Sorry, engineer that became a doctor, but it could work both ways if you.
Can it?
Because
you have to do an undergrad in engineering to become an engineer.
some people do PhDs in biomedical engineering.